So, welcome to Controlling Ideas. Today, I'm joined by Josh Campbell, who is a professional storyteller. He specializes specifically in personal narratives. For the last 5 years, he has served as the creative director of Spillit Memphis. He has performed across the Southeast in one-man shows and storytelling festivals. He has helped hundreds of storytellers prepare stories for the stage. He has conducted workshops in corporate and educational settings, and he is also middle school director at the Maria Montessori School in Memphis. And he believes everyone has a story to tell. Josh, thank you so much for joining me today. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Well, the first thing is that you believe that everybody has a story to tell, but for you, what was the moment that you realized I can help these people tell their stories?
Well, I always wanted to be in storytelling. I had done some in high school but always liked kind of sitting around a fire and telling stories. And so I wanted to get into storytelling. And I had a friend who started Spillit, which is the organization that I'm the director of now. And it was a friend of mine who invited me to be one of the featured storytellers. The first time I told a story, and it went well. And then the second time that we had the event, another storyteller came to me and said, "I really like the way that you told your story. Could you help me work on mine?" So I helped her, and her story went well. And then the third time, in that same event, we had someone who told their story, and they went 42 minutes when they told their story.
Wow.
So the third event, the partner at Spillit came to me and said, "These people need some help. Can you help everyone with their stories?" So starting at that event about 7 years ago, I started helping 5 or 6 storytellers every month develop their stories, meeting with them individually. And I was able to apply a lot of my teaching to it. I kind of enjoy that part of helping people develop their ideas. And it just seemed like somebody could tell me a story and I could find the thread that they needed to kind of weave throughout it. I could get them to kind of think about the through line of the story really well, and and help them find their voice. And I've been doing that ever since.
That's fantastic. And with you supporting so many now storytellers, like, do you have any favorite moments of a storyteller being able to take on the advice or take on the skills that you've given them?
Well, I mean, again, being a teacher, you can tell people what to do. They don't always do it. But the thing that really gets me is I love it when I see a storyteller, because when it's just me working with them one-on-one, I can kind of envision how things will be with an audience. I can kind of tell them, like, you should say this way, you should avoid this way. But I really enjoy it because I always tell my storytellers, one of my keys to avoiding bad storytelling is not to be too prepared. I always tell them, give themselves some room. Don't memorize your story, tell your story. And I always enjoy it when I see them put something in there that they felt was good because the audience was reacting to it, right? So when they go a little bit off script, and then I kind of see them telling their story, and maybe not telling the version of it that I told them to, but finding their voice is really exciting. I feel like that when something that I wasn't sure was going to work, but works for them, I realize that they've found their voice, and my job is done. And so I enjoy when people don't do what I tell them.
I like that. So it's almost like when people really truly find their authentic voice. Like, it's funny that you mentioned about not learning the actual full story, like word for word. I think when I started my kind of storytelling journey, I used to make that mistake where I'd learn everything line by line, and almost when I would go up on stage, I would then be almost robotic as I'm talking, rather than actually being natural. Um,
Well, I say that a lot too. Is that sometimes when you are in that, when you're too cadenced and too memorized, it can start sounding like slam poetry or something. And I enjoy slam poetry, but it has a certain rhythm to it that the audience has to be prepared for. If they think you're going to tell a story and you're getting up there and doing that, again, that's going to disconnect you from the audience. So sometimes I always joke, and I said in my TED talk, my dad says only I would make being lazy a virtue, but like don't be too prepared, because then you won't be able to really connect to your audience.
I love that. And you just mentioned your TED talk there. Uh, One thing about like creating a TED talk sometimes is that you're trying to condense a lot of information into a very short period of time. How do you tell a story while kind of trimming the fat and making sure that you're not like over bloating it or including too much irrelevant information?
My presentation that I typically do for the 7 keys to good storytelling is 45 minutes. They told me to cut it way down for the TED Talk. So when I came in the day before to practice with their coach, I had gotten it down to 19 minutes. Then they told me I had to cut it down even more. And so when I got up on the stage to practice, I got it down to 12 minutes. And then that night they called me and told me I had to get it down to 9 minutes. So I was constantly shaving it down, cutting it down, trying to get it to, and that's something I tell people. Another one of the things I say is, sometimes you have to trust your audience that they understand what you're saying without you having to say all the words to say, right? So what I did in that is I had a slide next to me for my TED Talk, and I basically just gave the quote that supported my idea, and then I gave 2 or 3 sentences to describe the thing I was getting, and I'm just leaving it to the audience to make that connection. And I did it in 8 minutes and 25 seconds. And so, and sometimes again, I don't take my own advice. I say the perfect length for a story is 7.5 minutes. I typically don't do less than 12 or 15 minutes every time I tell a story, because I'm the host, so no one can kick me off the stage. So I never take my own advice. But here I was at another event, and they were really making me take my own advice. And when I got done, I was like, "What? That's a tight 8.5 minutes." And now I struggle to go back to say, to do a 45-minute presentation with that material, because it's like I cut everything down. And now it's like the rest of it can feel a little extraneous. But so when I book out my presentation for an hour-long presentation, I have to go back and add it all back in. But that was a good exercise for me to have to cut it down. And it's one of the things I help storytellers with. I always say start in the action. Start. We don't need to know everything about you. A lot of people make that mistake. I have to explain everything about me to the audience before I can really start talking about my story. Well, most of the time, those things that you think you have to explain about are things that can be said pretty quickly. I was in Oxford, Mississippi last month, and a storyteller got up, and I had never worked with her before, and she said, "My first marriage was horrible." All he ever said to me was, "You better have dinner ready for me when I get home." And that sums up our marriage. And so just by saying that one sentence, everybody in the audience understood what she meant. All of us had an experience with that kind of relationship. They've been in that relationship or seen that type of relationship. And so in 15 seconds, she told us everything we needed to know about her first marriage. And her story was about how her grandson now lives with her, and she takes care of him because of the kids that came out of that marriage struggles. So that was the story she wanted to get to, and she got us through 15, 20 years of her life with just 15 seconds. And so sometimes and it's about trusting your audience to know what you're talking about. You got to trust your audience. I guess the short answer to that.
I love that. I really love that example because like just in what you're saying there as well, I think like that allows people as well to really visualize, like to put themselves in that moment that woman was going through. Like, and
yes,
that's really, really good. One thing that you've kept on saying is not taking your own advice, but you're a Montessori school teacher. I'm not sure like if you would like necessarily say that to your students, so to speak. Don't take my advice.
right.
So what are the kind of the storytelling lessons that you've been able to apply to teaching?
Well, I think it works both ways. I mean, I think I wanted to be a storyteller because I have to get up and tell a story every day. I think being a teacher has had more impact on my storytelling than vice versa. Uh, the thing about teaching is that when you're teaching a classroom, you want to engage in that class, but you don't want them all talking back to you. So just like when I say that when storytelling is a dialogue with only one person talking, teaching is like that as well. You want to engage your audience. You want to make sure they're paying attention and they're getting what you want, but you don't want them screaming back at you and talking. So trying to do those nonverbal communication between people and finding the people in the audience that you're connecting with. Also looking for the people that maybe you're not connecting with and seeing how they're reacting. I mean, that's teaching. And so I think that everybody should, it's almost like you get up and tell a story. You can be like, classes in session, the subject is me. It's like I tell people about when you say I specialize in personal narratives, and I tell people that using your own stories are the best ways to find your voice in front of an audience, because the subject that you know most about and that you can teach the most about is yourself. The thing that we think the most about is ourselves. The product that we sell every day of our life is ourselves. So if you can use the stories of yourself to find the way that you connect to an audience, then you can take that same voice and apply it to a subject that you're teaching, or a product that you want to sell, or a doctorate you need to defend, or anything like that. That's where that voice can be used in a lot of different areas. So I think storytelling is teaching, teaching is storytelling. It's hard to, I can't, they're too mixed up with me right now for that. So.
I love that. So a couple last questions from me. So really, then what is something that you've had to really emphasize with people, or what is the misconception that you have seen from a lot of people starting out their journey to become storytellers themselves?
I think that there's two things. One I talked about is you don't have to be funny. You don't have to get up and, there's a lot of times people think I can't get up there because I'm not going to be funny. And I have to say, it's not about laughter, it's about connection. People want to connect with you more than they want to laugh. And sometimes laughing is a good way of hearing that people are connected to you. But sometimes silence where you can tell people are really listening to you, is even more of a powerful connection. So you do not have to be funny. And you also don't have to have like an epic story that spans from when your grandfather came over from the old country to now and all of that. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be some great achievement that you had. It doesn't have to be this high stakes adventure every time. You just have to tell a story that humanizes you, and most importantly, because you're an average guy, an amateur story person telling your story, you want the audience to be able to see themselves in you. That's why amateur storytelling is so impactful and so important now, is that when we hear the stories from other people, we can connect. So laughter is not the most important thing. Excitement and adventure are the most important thing. It's the connection and empathy that the audience can find with you.
I love that. I think that's.
Oh, one more thing. Sorry.
Oh, nice.
When I did my TED Talk, I said, everybody's got a story. And they said to me, the feedback they said is that TED Talks are about revolutionary ideas. Don't you have anything revolutionary? And I was like, okay, here's the revolutionary idea. Everybody's got a story to tell. What holds them back is they think that they don't have a story anybody will listen to. And that is not true. And that is the revolutionary idea. You got a story, people want to hear it.
I love that. I think it was actually Malcolm Gladwell a while ago that was saying that if something is important to you, the likelihood is it's going to be important to somebody else as well.
True.
No,
Yes.
I love that. A final thing for me is like, so uh, where can we learn more about Spillit Memphis, and uh, how can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Well, spillitmemphis.org is our website, and and you can also follow us on Spillit Memphis on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. And I am the creative director there. I am also my whole tent is Josh Campbell storytelling. We do podcasts, we do things like that. So Spillit Memphis on Facebook. We also have a Spillit Memphis podcast where we record our stories live and then put them up on the podcast. So you can find us that way. That's the best way to find us for sure.
Excellent. And for anybody watching the video, we're going to include all of those links in the description. Josh, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, David, and I love what you're doing. I think this is a great way to get people to think more about storytelling. Thank you very much.